Imagine finding a tape in your own voice, confessing to something you don't remember. A confession that could destroy everything you built. Vladimir Putin once walked into a private vault deep in the Russian woods, alone. No security. No press. No record of the visit. What he found wasn't a weapon, it was a memory. One he had buried decades ago. This is not about spy games or global politics. This is about a man, facing a version of himself he hoped never to hear again, the disappearance that wasn't a disappearance. For 72 hours, no one saw him. No convoy. No bodyguards. No press releases. No working meetings with obscure governors. No TV coverage of him walking slowly through a hospital hallway, nodding in silence. Just nothing. And in Moscow, nothing is louder than silence. It started on a Tuesday. The Kremlin's press office issued a sudden cancellation of a major appearance in St. Petersburg. Official reason? Scheduling conflicts. No big deal, right? But then came the second cancellation. And the third. Then the national TV channels, the ones that carefully orchestrate the public image of Russia's president, started re-airing old footage. The same shots. Same events. People noticed. Journalists whispered. Western intelligence scrambled. And just like that, the question was everywhere. Where's Vladimir Putin? Some say he was sick. Some say he was dead. Some say he was negotiating with someone no one dares name. But the truth? The truth is stranger. Because Putin wasn't in hiding. He wasn't ill. He wasn't dead. He was inside an old apartment. On the outskirts of Moscow. In silence. Alone. And the reason he was there, unchaperoned, unrecorded, unguarded, goes back decades. To a name he never mentioned. A door he never opened. A message he once ignored, and regretted for the rest of his life. What he did during those 72 hours, and why he returned without ever explaining himself, is a story that never made it to state media. But the signals were there. If you knew where to look. It began in 1989. The photograph and the promise. In the summer of 1989, Vladimir Putin was still a mid-ranking KGB officer stationed in Dresden. He was precise. Cautious. Invisible. He had a routine, daily reports, coded messages, small-time surveillance, and the occasional night of vodka with bored operatives. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until she arrived. She wasn't a spy. Wasn't a politician. She was a translator, officially. A Russian-born, German-raised civilian contractor sent to assist with diplomatic archives during the last stretch of Soviet presence in East Germany. Her name was Elena Markov. And within weeks, she disrupted everything. Putin was trained to observe without reacting. But with her, his instincts slipped. She was fluent in 6 languages, quoted Anna Akhmatova without flinching, and challenged his views in a way that didn't feel like rebellion, more like precision. They met often. At the Archive Center, in cafes just off the main square, occasionally by the riverbank where Elena claimed she could think clearer. One evening, while the GDR was already trembling and the Berlin Wall's cracks had begun to whisper, she handed him a photograph. It was old. Black and white. Slightly torn. "Keep this," she said. "You'll need to remember that not everything lost is forgotten." He laughed, uncertain. "What's that supposed to mean?" She just smiled. The photograph showed a small apartment, her childhood home in Leningrad. She had drawn a red circle around the window on the 4th floor. And on the back, in neat Cyrillic script, a single line. "When the silence becomes too loud, come here." Then, like so many things in collapsing regimes, she vanished. Some said she returned to Russia. Some said the KGB detained her. Some said nothing at all. Putin never spoke of her again. But he kept the photo. Always. Fast forward to 2022. That same photograph, now faded and creased at the edges, appeared on a desk deep within the Kremlin. He stared at it for several minutes. And without a word, ordered his entire schedule cleared for 3 days. The apartment with no records. Putin's motorcade didn't announce its destination. The Kremlin aides assumed it was a secure inspection. A pre-approved visit. A symbolic appearance somewhere quiet. It wasn't. Instead, the convoy moved discreetly through Moscow's older districts, those built before databases, before digital signatures, before everything left a trail. It stopped at a block most had forgotten: chipped concrete, faded Soviet murals, windows covered in yellowing curtains. He stepped out alone. Bodyguards watched, puzzled, as their president approached a rusted door marked only with the number 43, no cameras, no intercom, no digital lock. Just a key. A physical, old-fashioned key. Putin produced it from his coat. The same one that had been taped behind the photograph all these years. The door opened with a groan. Dust hung in the air like memories waiting to settle. The hallway smelled like time. He climbed 3 floors. 4th window on the left. Just like the photo. Inside the apartment, nothing had changed. Not because someone had preserved it, but because no one had touched it. It was a relic. A museum of forgotten intentions. Children's books in German and Russian. A cracked teacup. A record player with a half-spun Tchaikovsky vinyl. And on the kitchen table, a notebook. Unmarked. He opened it carefully. The first page simply read, "For the man who became an empire." The rest? Blank. Except on the final page, scribbled hastily, in Elena's handwriting. "You chose silence. But I never stopped speaking." He closed the book, eyes unreadable. No one knew he had entered. No one would know he stayed. For 7 hours, he remained in that apartment. Not as president. Not as ex-KGB. Just as the man who remembered. By dusk, he stood at the window, looking out. The unseen signature. The apartment was still. Almost sacred. As if history had paused in this one forgotten room. Putin stood by the old desk now, his fingers brushing across the wood, scratched, stained, worn from time and use. One corner was chipped, just like he remembered. A mark from a time before cameras. Before power. He pulled open the drawer. Inside, among dried pens and faded ink bottles, was an envelope. Yellowed, sealed. The handwriting on it was unmistakable, Elena's. He opened it slowly. Inside was a form. A standard Soviet clearance document. Blank. Except for one line, at the bottom. A signature. Not his. But hers. It wasn't official. It wasn't legal. But it was permission. She had signed it in his name. Years ago. For something that was never meant to be archived. The realization hit hard. Elena had once stepped into a role that wasn't hers, to protect him, to deflect suspicion, to erase a moment before it could grow into a threat. She'd forged his name to bury something deeper. A face flashed in his memory, Yuri, the young idealist. The one who had vanished from Leningrad records. A missing comrade. A closed file. Now he knew why. Putin sat. The gravity of it all settled like lead in his chest. This wasn't just nostalgia. It was unfinished business. A story that had been left dangling, because he'd let it dangle. Because power meant you could ignore the ghosts. Until they started knocking. He turned the document over. A phone number. Moscow prefix. No name. He stared at it for a long time. Then, against instinct, he dialed. It rang once. Twice. Then a click. A voice, the archive that never burned. The next morning, Putin was already at the dacha before sunrise. Not the official one. The other. Buried in the woods outside Peredelkino, this place wasn't on any public list. No guards. No cameras. Just a forgotten Soviet structure wrapped in moss and fog, an old KGB retreat turned private vault. He hadn't been there in decades. The door creaked open. Dust and silence greeted him like an old comrade. He descended the narrow stairs into a basement that smelled of damp paper and cold iron. Shelves lined the walls, reel-to-reel tapes, film canisters, files bound in red thread. He stopped at cabinet 7. Inside, a single tape recorder, labeled in Cyrillic, Case 472, Partial Confession. Do not duplicate. He slid the tape in. Pressed play. Static. Then a voice. His own. But younger. Less filtered. I was there that night. I saw what happened to Yuri. We didn't stop it. We chose not to. He flinched. He didn't remember ever recording that. But the voice was unmistakably his. The words were unpolished, raw, almost like a purge before erasure. A private confession, never meant to be heard again. Then another voice entered the recording, Elena. You need to understand, Volodya. He was never the threat. It was what he knew. A shuffle. Papers rustling. Then a sentence, buried in the static. If this ever surfaces, they'll erase both of us. He hit stop. Took the tape out. Some secrets are erased. Others are simply hidden. And sometimes, what you don't destroy, ends up defining who you are. If this story made you think twice about what power chooses to forget, subscribe for more untold truths and shadowed moments that shaped history. Don't forget to like the video and drop a comment below. Do you think Putin left that tape behind, for someone to find? We'll be watching.